Madam Boot Camp Clerk, could you call the roll, please?
Here.
Here.
Right, are we ready? We're all mic'd up.
We are ready. Madam Legislative Affairs Staffer. I think that's your
Everybody
proper
has-
title in the committee, right?
Everybody has some titles today.
Have some titles.
You want a motion to accept the agenda with the following amendment?
I think that's what
Yes,
we're
sir.
gonna head to next.
So moved.
Would you state the amendment for the record, Mr. Taylor?
To add an executive session to discuss the negotiations incident to proposed contractual agreements pursuant to South Carolina Code 30-4-7082 legislative affairs.
We have a motion, there's a second.
Second.
Could you call the roll, please?
Aye.
Aye. All right,
Perfect.
now we're into committee discussion.
Yes, sir, we are. So in front of you, you have our agenda for this meeting. And attached to that agenda are the list of priorities. As you see for our list of discussion items, it's City of Columbia legislative priorities. And that's a topic for today's discussion in this meeting. So we have listed on the second page, a list of policy and budget-related legislative priorities that we wanted you all to discuss and give us some guidance about which ones were most important.
This one?
Yes, sir, that's the second page, after your agenda. And then we've also included some information that Kyle sent to us about the Municipal Association, the MASC 2022 Regional Advocacy Meeting. So we'll discuss that in some detail. And then we also included the minutes from our last work session on Tuesday, October 18th, where we talked about legislative priorities and issues. So we wanted to have that for you for your reference.
You want to, Mr. Mayor, you want to go through this municipal association items first?
We can start with it, or we can do it on the tail end.
I was just thinking, we'd hear this stuff, thoughts from perhaps our lobbyist, and then probably should kind of end after hearing all that with what our priorities should be.
No problem.
Everybody, Dr. Boswell, why
Sounds like a good order.
That works.
don't you go through the,
Councilman, I agree with that. This is simply a summary, this is a summary of one of the regional meetings. I think the Municipal Association had either 9 or 10 regional meetings around the state, and they try to do one close to all of their, all the local governments around the state, municipalities. Last week, they did one at Casey City Hall. This is just a summary of what was talked about there at that meeting. We were able, I go to one of these a year just to kind of listen, and at the end, if you look on the second page down there at the bottom, when they go around the room asking the different mayors and council members from the different local governments that attend, what are issues that they'd like to see addressed. I did, because we had just been in here the day before, was able to raise down there at the very bottom of the page, the increasing municipal fine limits and ordinance violation fine limits, and then the red light cameras for traffic calming up top of the next page. So we were represented there and put that on the list. They will consider everything that they heard at all their different meetings, and then they will come out with an agenda. Over the last 10 years, some years the Municipal Association has a very tight legislative agenda of 4, maybe 5 issues. Sometimes they put out an expansive list of things that they'd like to see addressed. So this is not a recommendation from them of what local governments should be concentrating on at the State House. This is simply their listening, a summary of their listening session meeting. So I think this is much more operative. This first page is much more operative for our team being effective for the council and for your purposes of giving direction to the city.
Well, let me ask you this, Kyle, for the sake of discussion. If we go to the issues the meeting wants the MASC to focus on, if you specifically just go through those, just so we have an understanding
Municipal,
of whether we're on the same page or on a different page
good,
than what their issues are.
happy to do that. I think that's good.
What,
Do you mind before we jump to the back page? I just, 2 minutes on the opioid stuff.
okay, that was,
Just because, I mean, we've heard so many different things, and I know you've been involved in this and that, but just so that the public knows what's going on and we're doing, because I mean, it has become more of a discussion point lately.
I'm totally fine with that, and I would actually.
Hit the issues meeting, I think.
Okay, well, I'd like to add to the opioid discussion, just to what you have here, to, you know, and Dr. Bustles, you may add to this, you know, what are the type of things that we should be looking at too as a city?
For the abatement strategies?
Yeah, for abatement strategies, what should we be doing, grant requests, what should we have these guys working on for us, and the whole shooting match?
So for the guaranteed funds, it's gonna be a pretty straightforward process because it's guaranteed, but we do have to formally apply. It's something I think our lobbyists could take care of on our behalf. And we simply have to just let them know under what major bucket of abatement strategies it's going to be used. We don't have to do a program application or anything like that to get these guaranteed funds. Abatement strategies can be anywhere from prevention programs for different populations, those protective or at-risk intervention programs, treatment programs. It could also be related to some of the city services that indirectly affect the health and well-being of our citizens. So it's very broad, which is good, and we want to get this money out as quickly as possible, and we're going to be doing it in cycles. So the guaranteed funds is going to be, again, a very straightforward application. That's one bucket of funds. There's also discretionary funds that we're also eligible for. That's going to be more of a traditional grant process where we talk about the types of programs that we would be working on.
So from the abatement on the intervention and treatment, there's something we could apply to that would enhance what we're doing with the wraparound at the Rapid Shelter?
Yep, so that could fall under that. Some of the workforce readiness things that you've been interested in and youth engagement and that would also fall under that. So we've really tried to make the guaranteed funds as easy to access as possible because the committee will simply just say, yes, no, we have an application, we don't. It's not a approval process in the same way. Now, again, if we apply for the discretionary funds, that's more of a more of a level of scrutiny as to how those funds will be used.
Do we know how much the guaranteed portion is for the city?
I don't have it off the top of my,
It's right here.
but there's more coming. So every year Johnson & Johnson is paying.
In the
Top of the second page.
second page, top.
420,000 today. If everyone paid incrementally, evenly over the 18-year period, then each year that would step up. Johnson & Johnson wants to pay their amount all at once to get it off their balance sheet, I guess. So when they pay this $60 million, which is expected in the next period of months, then that $420,000 to the city of Columbia will jump to whatever proportion of that $60 million we're eligible for. We don't know what that is, but it's going to be a pretty good
It's gonna be a
chunk
decent
of
amount.
money in
And
the
I'd like
coming
to,
12 months.
and I'd like to read onto the record as well some of the other strategies. I just pulled up our report. So we have, you can expand training for first responders, schools, community to address opioids. You could also use it for, of course, traditional treatment, focus on pregnant and postpartum women, expanding treatment for kids, expansion of warm handoff programs and recovery services where some of the wraparound stuff could go under that. Treatment for incarcerated population, it could be media campaigns, prevention programs in schools, funding medical providers, funding community drug disposal programs. So there's a wide range of things that fall under what would be eligible.
Do we have any recommendations that we want to start the discussion with on what we might want to see that guaranteed funds used for here?
I think we can talk about some of the things we're already working on around homelessness, around some of the youth engagement, around some of the workforce, and that would all be okay. We don't have to go super in-depth for the guaranteed funds.
Don't have to. And is there a deadline on that? When we
So we plan on making the deadline sometime in quarter one of 2023, so, yeah. And that's for the discretionary. And for the guaranteed, we hope to have an update in the next month, because that's a quick process. We just need to see that we submitted an application and the funds go out.
This here says, it opens on the 24th of October, which was yesterday, and closes on December 2nd.
For the guaranteed.
For the guarantee, so we need to
get,
consider what's absolutely required. So would a letter be sufficient, or do you need a full?
No, there's an application including, I think, a letter of support, yeah.
I think if it's just
In our grant consultants.
on the guaranteed funds, it's probably just an administrative.
Right, no, but on the discretionary.
Right, I'm just talking about the guarantees, what he's talking about, the applications due by
December 2nd.
December 2nd.
Who would do that internally? Who would we assign that to?
I don't know, let me check on that, because I don't know that that would be one of our consultants to
That's
do
what I was
that.
thinking more, that if
Because
it's,
that would be an internal
That's what-
staffer.
Internal, we're talking about the discretionary.
Yeah.
That's what y'all-
Yeah.
well, that's what, my next thing was, that answers the question on the guarantee. Then on the discretionary stuff, y'all haven't set the deadline yet.
That's
Okay.
gonna be quarter one of 2023 sometime.
And what I just suggest that we consider doing, Mr. Mayor, at one of our next meetings, or even at a work session, have a discussion on what we would like to apply for grants to do.
You might want to double check on this, because this document says it opens on the 24th. It also opens on the 24th, but
Ends
closes on the 15th of January.
January.
No, we haven't gotten that update yet, so I have not, but that might be the most recent. They haven't sent us any updates on the discretionary.
Vice chairman, right?
Yeah.
I was gonna say.
The only thing that I remember from listening to this, and I'm not sure if it's reflected in this document, is that they were encouraging applicants to partner with agencies in the area. So in other words, City of Columbia takes a look at what nonprofits in our area are in this space. Dr. Bustles, you would know that.
Yeah, for
better than others.
discretionary, absolutely.
So that we are not trying to sit around and figure out how our city staff goes out and does all this sort of work or whatever, but that we're putting together basically a team of people that already do this work, that we can help fund them in their work.
Yeah, and that was something we talked about, especially for organizations or ideas that don't have a robust infrastructure behind it. But I think it would still be pretty competitive if, one of our offices that's going to grant these dollars to do specific things applies as well and has a hand in it. Again, the political funds, very straightforward. We just have to formally ask for it and we get it. This is, again, the discretionary in deciding what additional funds we'd want.
Is there an office been created to administer this, or is there another
it's-
agency that's doing it?
So it's now the SCORF, which is the South Carolina Opioid Recovery Commission. And so that is falling under the Attorney General's office.
So we can certainly come up with a list of areas that we feel that we can immediately be impacted, whether it's the first responders, fire, peace, or it's the wraparound services at the Rapid Shelter, and then
Workforce projects, we got youth we got a lot of things, so I don't think it's gonna be a problem for us to identify those. I think we just gotta rank them up and then.
But do we feel good about the December 2nd deadline to just submit a application for the political guaranteed funds?
Sure.
It's very
I would hope so.
straightforward. Like, there's
Not
not,
too
you know, the
complicated.
discretionary is a little more complicated, but
Yeah, we'll get, maybe Missy's group grants to work up. We'll get a staffer assigned to review and look at it.
Just need to put those date lines on our radar.
Mm-hmm.
Less than 40 days on one and less than 60 days on the other.
Yes, sir.
I think the next thing, as we move forward, I just want to quickly, Clint, with the 55 million in grants available for shovel ready, we have applied for some of that money, correct?
Yes, sir. So, stormwater, we're gonna be making our application to the Office of Resilience. And, for the water and sewer, we advocated with Ms. Bonnie Ammons to eliminate the $10 million per entity cap. And so, she worked with us. We felt like that was inappropriate because Greenville has a separate water utility, a separate sewer utility, and a separate stormwater. The city does the stormwater administration. Columbia has one entity that administers all three. For them to potentially get $10 million per entity and only get 10 million is not fair. And so, she now, before the applications went in, she eliminated the per entity and said it's $10 million cap per project. And we're allowed to submit more than one project. But she is looking at geographic diversity so that the major cities don't get all the money. And so that was her play of, I'm still looking at geographic diversity, and I can't promise that you'll get these, but we submitted 2 large projects that were, would allow us to get the full $10 million grant if each project were selected. So we're hopeful at least to get 20 million, and that's kind of the way we've left it. And I think she said if there happens to be money left over, there'd be another round of applications. I'm not hopeful that, I mean, I'd love it if there was money left over, but I'm thinking there's probably not gonna be. But hopefully we'll get 20 million at least.
Clint, based on the report that you showed us recently with our, capacity issues and things like that, I mean, would we not, and I think one of you guys may have even suggested this when we were talking before, like, let's just say, for example, we service the water and sewer for, pick a town, Arcadia Lakes. Do we do an application in conjunction with Arcadia Lakes for projects within Arcadia Lakes? I mean, if you look at, because we're probably today, looking at municipalities, the city of Columbia, Eastover, we probably have some reach into. Forest Acres, Arcadia Lakes, there's gotta be more cities than that. Blythewood.
Yes, sir. Winsboro, Chapin.
That's what I was, yeah, exactly. Irmo, I mean, if we had any discussions with them on looking at it on a city-by-city type basis, because that creates geographic diversity.
Yes, sir, it does. Our understanding was, at the time, was that it had to be you have to be a water and sewer entity to apply. And so we couldn't really submit a co-application with Irmo because they're not a water and sewer entity. Since we were the provider, we would be the one having to submit the application. Richland County is a provider. They submitted their own application for projects for their smaller wastewater utilities. So we didn't see a window to say combine with Forest Acres to get the money specifically carved out for water and sewer infrastructure since we were the provider.
I was just wondering, it may be worth going back and talking to her.
Yes, sir.
Because here's the deal, if you've got 2 big projects that are $10 million, these other ones might be $800,000 projects. You don't want to jeopardize losing a second 10 million to get one 800,000, but it could certainly, especially on the second go round, you could submit 4 or 5 million to $2 million projects.
Yes, sir, and I think there's some opportunities, Town of Chapin, they have a utility, we're also the provider, wholesale provider, and they do, and so there are some, for smaller bites of the apple, so we'll absolutely keep that in mind. Thank you. Does that answer? Yes, sir.
I just want to make sure that we are geared in. And then I would say from there, we'll skip to issues the meeting group wants to focus on.
So there was a mention of short-term rentals, that there's likely to be state legislation on that this year. And in the past, that state legislation has been to bar a local government from doing anything. I'm not sure that it will be something as inelegant as that, although something like that will probably be introduced. I think that we should anticipate that there will be short-term rental legislation, and so we would have to then look to the city. Your lobbying team would look to you to give us feedback on what's being debated. PTSD services, this is the same issue that we deal with every year, which involves the compensation of first responders for PTSD under the health insurance plan of the state. I believe that where we are now on that issue is that if the person suffering PTSD was present and actively involved in the situation that gave rise to the PTSD, then it is compensable. But it's not compensable otherwise under the state plan. I think that's where we are right now. Not positive with that. That comes up almost every year. Tort claims limit, like we talked about last week. I believe that where we are today is that if the person who is suffering from PTSD is a first responder, covered by the state plan, if that person was on active duty and at the scene of the circumstance that gave rise to PTSD, then it's compensable. It's really difficult where to draw the line on what's compensable and what's not under the state. What the state plan can cover, what the state plan doesn't cover. Excuse me, we talked about tort claim limits last week. That is the maximum amount that the city will be liable in any lawsuit against the city for negligence, torts, et cetera, et cetera. It's been at the same amount, I think, since 1997, maybe 1998. And Ms. Knox could probably talk to you more intelligently about this than I can. It was proposed by Senator Harpootlian 2 years ago, to be raised to $2 million.
Trial lawyers are pushing.
Yes, the trial
I was gonna
lawyers
say, the
would like to
cities
raise it
wouldn't
up.
be pushing
No, no.
Okay.
It got out of the House, it got out of the Senate in 2021 and did not come up in 2022 in the House. So we should look for that. The next one doesn't apply to us. It's the requirement for small towns to have audits that has to do with small towns not having enough, a small town with a $20,000 budget having to do a $7,000 audit. Is the concern. The next one is a critical need for local government employees, and this goes to the issue that we talked about last week about people being able to retire and come back to work, waiving the cap with a shorter time period. And then anything else that can help serve getting the needs, it can help address the need for local government employees. Like I said, I raised the next one and the next one, which are, for the record here, increasing municipal fine limits and increasing ordinance violation fines. And then that's one, and then the next one is allowing the use of red light cameras for the purpose of traffic calming.
That's Mr. Duval's issue that he wants included as one of our priorities as well.
And we
For
do
the
have it on our
municipal
list.
fines, what was it that you were proposing last year, the actual fine? Was there a fine amount, or was it just simply we'd like to see it be raised?
No, we did not. There was nothing done legislatively on that last year. That was an issue that the mayor raised at our meeting here a
Okay.
week ago. And so we raised it as something the city of Columbia would like to see. And so that would be something that we would have to find somebody to introduce that legislation.
Well, let me ask you this. I mean, rather than leaving that so open-ended, you'll speak with Ms. Knox on what our current limits are, and let's push for, not for to
Specific.
raise it, but to raise it to X. I think that takes we were in a meeting earlier today, and we discussed that the fear of the unknown stops lots of stuff, and the fact that if you're asking for something and it's not known what you're asking for, it makes it more difficult to get. So if today, for example, our limit is $500, we may want to see it raised to $1,500 or $2,000.
Especially around litter and other things.
Litter and dumping are our biggest issue.
I actually think that would go hand in hand too. If we're able to push the litter stuff forward, then we want to see an increase in municipal funds.
What's our maximum fine for litter set by state law? We are by our ordinance or by?
For 500.
I thought what is the state law, what is the state cap on local government's ordinance violation fines? Is it $1,000 or is it 500? 500. So we cannot find, the state law prevents us from finding anyone over $500 for. I think it's I think that may be what it
See, and
mentioned,
unfortunately,
500.
with the inflationary economy that we've been experiencing, I'm not so sure $500 is the deterrent we need, especially when it comes to some of these dumping issues
Right.
that we're seeing in our communities.
No, I'm only laughing because you're making the same arguments that the trial lawyers are making on the Tort Claims Act, you know. Inflationary pressures in the last 25 years, we need to raise it. But I would,
Then I'll withdraw my comment, and
would-
I'll just say,
I would,
to incentivize people not to break the law, it needs to be higher than it is today.
so,
We're talking about people breaking the law, they're talking about their next vacation, there's a big difference.
when we go to the legislature, let's cut to the chase here, $2,000? What would we want to raise it to?
We will, but let's figure out what the number is that we want to go talk about.
$2,500 limit? $2,000 limit?
Auction, I mean, I would say
Start high.
I would
That's
say
what
20,
that's
I would say raise it to where we got the ability to go to the state limits on fines. Why would we be any different? Well, but I mean, why wouldn't we have our lower level offense fines be the same as the state lower level offense fines? For example, if littering is $1,000 fine at the state level, why are we
Why
at
were we
500?
capped at 500?
I mean, in other words,
When we start writing some $1,000 tickets, there's gonna be some people quit dumping in our neighborhoods.
well, why don't we say that we have we move up from 500 to, I mean, I'm fine with 1,000. I mean, and 1,000 or the state level, whichever is greater.
So,
Say I say we go
like,
1,500, go higher.
like a kid,
1,500 is
ask for
fine.
more than you expect, so let's ask for 2 and hope we
Yeah,
land at
like,
1,000.
yeah,
That's
Right,
fine,
it's
I don't have a
up
problem
to-
with that.
yeah, up to 2,000.
I mean, don't y'all think that makes it a little bit easier to at least talk about it over there?
I would let these guys talk so I don't talk the whole time. I would say at least $2,000 or why, we don't
That's right.
break our pick on $500.
That's
All
right.
that effort.
Are there certain levels based on the amount of littering? Or is just one across the board? If I drop a cup that's littering, that could be 1,000, or
Could be
if I,
1,000.
That's
Don't
right,
be truckloads
it's
of
up
stuff.
to,
okay.
but even on littering, it's up to
Oh,
it's always up to.
Are there levels of
Discretion,
increase
yeah.
for multiple offenses? Like, I've got second offense, or third offense?
Should be.
Or is it just the same?
I don't think on ordinances. I don't think that there's I don't think that the
I don't think
the
there's
offenses
a
increase.
step up
Right.
per offense. I mean,
That's right.
It's just a cap
Yeah,
out.
we just want to raise the cap from 500 to 2,000. That's
Give
real
the
simple.
judges the discretionary, you know, if it's a first time offense, he may only do 500, the second one goes 1,000, 1,500 up to 2. Make it painful because some of these guys are repeat offenders.
We were getting close
On
to
the-
getting finished with this.
Yeah,
document.
on the red light camera stuff, I think we've got to sit down and discuss this a little deeper about the approach. I know that there's several groups working on it, but we need to have a solid approach that actually has chance to catch legs. And, you know, a red light is not the first place to start. I mean, cameras in the sense, because school zones and other places where we're having to spend extra resource officers to be there could be captured with this, work zones and others. So I think we gotta do a little work on what we present over there. We've got data to show, really what it is. And I know Howard and his group's been working on it. I just think we gotta tweak it because I think they're gonna make it hard for us to get movement on it.
I totally agree. I just, you know, again, in the effort to be inclusionary, I talked to Councilman Duval about what his priorities were in advance of this meeting, and that was really the only one.
And I've talked to several other mayors who may wanna join in on drafting something because they all have the same situation, especially with our limited resources. And, you know, average wreck at an intersection takes about 2 to 2.5 hours of our officers' time.
And I would reiterate that any legislation that we propose, if you're talking about it getting legs, I think that you're going to enhance it getting legs if it includes some participation by the State Department of Transportation in saying, yes, this is a problem.
That's why you get paid the big bucks and we don't. Because we want you guys to build those alliances on these things. This is really just about us letting you know as these things come up, because these are more than citywide. These are, you know, a lot of these are state issues. I mean, we'll talk about mental health funding in a minute for urban areas. I mean, this is not something for just Columbia alone. We need for you guys to help build partnerships with the Greenvilles, the Charlestons, in some cases even our smaller communities in South Carolina, because again, some of these help the city, but also help the whole state. And that's what we
Get
just.
Ted and some other folks on board. I think it'd be helpful. That's right.
Let's see, we are at, the next one was someone from a different municipality talking about making sure that officials and local governments know about the funding options for roads. And then the last one is enclave annexation and donut holes. There continues to be a lot of pressure on that issue, and we'll just see what it brings.
Can we go back just a second on the road situation? I think it might be helpful for us to understand more locally and statewide, because how the road funding does work. I mean, Mr. Mayor, you at one point in time were involved, I think, or even a member of the Richland County Transportation Commission. And then that's who the C funds go through?
They do, but I will tell you as a committee member, those decisions were made before the committee came to the meeting. A lot of us didn't have a lot of input on the decision of those, but that is the main source for that funding.
So, I mean, here, the question would be, you know, do we ever approach DO, and this would just be not necessarily a legislative issue this year, but is there some dialogue that we have at some point in time with Secretary Hall or others about, you know, cities that have, you know, because you and I, we all know that DOT has been putting a lot of pressure on municipalities to take over some local roads, yet not necessarily thinking that the proper amount of funding follows those acceptance of those roads. I mean, is it worth our while to have some discussion at some point in time about municipalities that have road programs being able to participate or getting their own C fund allowance rather than having it all controlled by the county? I mean,
Well, I think there's a big discussion about that. You know, having sat down with the commissioner, the county council, and other folks discussing about the shortfalls, because, you know, in a city like Columbia, 492 miles worth of roads, 71% of them controlled by DOT, and the response to me from staff was, well, all our maintenance money goes to the highway. Well, wait a minute. I pay gas tax. I pay this. My constituents should have the same. So I do think this is a legislative period where we got to have a discussion about how we designate those funds to make sure that we're getting that money to take care of our roads in our community. There is some effort on the beautification where DOT is invested in street sweepers and some new programs to help in the gateways, but it's very limited. And the reason it's actually happening is because the county and the city are helping contribute to that program. But I think this legislation, we've got to make sure that we are seeing some funding put back into that 492 miles worth of road. Now, how we carve that up or how we do it, there's a lot of discussion.
That's my point, Mr. Mayor. I think we begin the discussion on how it gets done and probably then look for a solution, maybe in the next year or so. But, again, whether it's even penny tax money and things like that, it seems that all the road money decisions are made outside of the city when again, I would argue that our contributions to those funding streams
Are large.
may be far more than what we're seeing come back. And again, I think part of this discussion is for you guys to begin to have some discussions with leadership over there and see what the appetite is for some of these type changes. And then hopefully come back to us at the next meeting after say in January or February, saying we've talked, and you're going to say, yeah, the people understand that the cities need more control over repairing their city streets, or you may come back and say, these guys, they ain't getting in the middle of it. I mean, and then we can decide whether we need to sit down with, again, other cities and build a coalition to have a discussion.
I know it's a hot discussion with all the regional mayors as well.
It is always a need.
And what is it that they can do now? Just moving to the next one, though, what is it that the state can do to make it to help with the annexation of donut holes?
There has been legislation proposed for the last few sessions that would allow a government by council decision to annex donut holes that are completely surrounded by the city or the state line or something like Fort Jackson. I believe if it's 25 acres or less. So
What's been the attitude towards those proposals in the past?
the county association is 100% opposed to it. And the property rights, the people who are concerned about protecting property rights at all costs are 100% opposed to it, because people ought to be able to do whatever they want with their land.
Why would a county oppose it? So, I mean, for example.
Costing them more money
Yeah.
to service that area.
Well, it's not even that. In Richland County, today in the city of Columbia, the county, I believe, Jeff Peglin's still in here? I believe the county gets a percentage more in property tax than the city does. Aren't they at like 20%, and we're like at 19?
I don't know, in the incorporated, it's different than the other.
Oh, it is?
It is.
Okay. Well, my point would be, if we take it over, the property tax stays about the split, and we end up with the
Actually,
services.
savings for them as a
That's my
property
point.
owner with water and everything else from the service standpoint, but it costs the county more in those unincorporated areas because they're having to bring a truck totally into it for both
And the other
police.
issue too, remember we talked about this with our last meeting on water and sewers, our stormwater program on a donut hole. We're managing all the stormwater, yet the neighbors are having to pay for all the cost for the guy in the donut hole. So, there's an equitable situation there when it comes to the deal. I think if we can move that thing forward, that would be very good.
There's a process for annexing today, and the process is, I read an article on Greenville recently. If anybody in here knows it, you can tell me. It's something like 50% of the people, 50% of the property owners in the donut hole have to petition to have a vote, and then 70% have to agree, or maybe it's 70% have to petition and 50% agree, and then
It's reverses to 74.
Okay, yeah, so, right, and so when you bring up these bills that would allow it to be done by a council vote, the pushback is not that we want our donut holes forever. The pushback is there's a process in place, And if people want to come into the city, they are more than welcome to come into the city. If they don't want to come in the city, it's because they want to live in the county. So don't take people's right away. I'm giving you the argument of the other side.
And I totally, no, I totally
So
understand
that's
that.
where, so if we wanted to, local government cities have the ability, have the option to spend the money to do what, Charleston right now has a annexation coordinator, and I think, and I say she, because I'm pretty sure it's a woman, has a staff of 2 or 3 people, and their entire job every day is to go push people to annex into the city.
We
It's a
understand
very
that.
encumbersome process, though. Right, and it involves a lot, and I can tell you there are areas that have been working on it for probably 3 or 4 years and still can't get across because property owners are moves, and so you get a renter who signs on, which they can, but then they can't, they're not there to come back and vote, so it starts the whole process over. And I think what we're looking for is a clearer path to eliminate this. Because what's happening is to get, when the county redid their zoning, they ended up rezoning some of these donut holes. Give you an example, one that was between the city and Forest Acres that allowed them to add mobile homes and all this stuff, just basically threw their zoning away. And so you have all these people who are up, but they have nowhere to go. They're literally stuck because of the process. So I think, as we go through this, maybe we should present a path forward that we could get other people to join in on and say, hey, it's time to update this and make it a smoother. It makes much more sense for everybody. I think the property rights people, I think they're a little off on that one.
And there's
But
also
everybody
safeguards.
has their opinion.
But there's safeguards in the process of a council vote too, right? And we need to bring that out. And there's gonna be plenty of times where you can oppose something, just like any other vote that we do, so. I agree, I think that that's something we should look at.
And part of this is public awareness too. I mean, again, I don't think, for example, it never occurred to me until we had the presentation by Mr. Shealy a couple of weeks ago that on our stormwater fees, that everybody, all your neighbors are paying for all your stormwater repairs and so forth if you're not in the city. I mean, so I think making those type things a little bit more known to folks is something that helps.
I assume this is Matt, where we could actually have a visual presentation, we could show somebody, these are the donut holes.
I think, yeah, we
Oh,
got
yeah.
that, but it's, most of these donut holes are not very big, to be honest with you. And I'll just echo what the mayor said. I mean, calls in y'all's, maybe not your neighborhood, but over around Satchel Ford, that have little donut holes there, that all of a sudden, and it was interesting because when the county did their rezoning, and they reclassed what was formerly single-family residential in a donut hole to multifamily and mobile home parks. I mean, the interesting thing was people were calling up complaining that their property all of a sudden got made multifamily instead of single-family, when we all know what the value probably happened. So I think that's one of the reasons the county actually went and withdrew their zoning deal and are reworking it now. So anyway.
That'd give rise to the idea of that, pass a law that says if a county rezones a donut hole, that the city has the option of annexing the donut hole. Something like that. I don't know. It's up every year. I talk to folks in the lobby about this every single year.
So that was a good discussion, because Kyle talked about a lot of things that were already on the minutes from that work session. And that's where this list got compiled, was
right.
from those minutes and the things that you all discussed in there. We've talked about a couple of those things, but we have them listed. Mr. Taylor, did you all, or the mayor, you want to go by one down this
Yeah,
list
let's
and
just
then
go down it.
try to prioritize them? Tell
Add
us which
two,
ones.
Strike out whatever we
Right.
need to do.
Yes, sir. All right, well, let's start with that first one.
That's the tax modernization, right?
Yeah, this will, just so you're aware, we've been building a model for a year for a property tax modernization program, or probably even a better word would be a property tax competitiveness. It's going to require some special legislation. I think sometime in the next 3 weeks, we'll have the outline on that. I think, Representative Finley and Representative Rutherford, I think, are our two Ways and Means Committee members from inside the city. I think these tax rules, don't they have to start in the House? Isn't that right? Not like this?
For
Just appropriation.
Okay, well, regardless, we, in other words, I think we'll get them, I know I've talked to Mr. Finley to take our outline to, what's it called, Legislative Council that writes the legislation. And that will probably have to be, I think frankly, our number one priority when it comes to new legislation being passed. And once we have that, we'll want to sit down with y'all and look at the strategy on what's the best way to get that through.
Well, and I think we have to understand that we're using the mechanism that the state's used already. So we're not trying to reinvent the wheel. We're trying to use the avenues that they've already used when they did it with the industrial rate.
That's right. We've done it
So I think that's
twice.
very important key as we move forward, is that we're not trying to create something new. We're using avenues that were already opened.
We can flesh this out when you get the thing. Is it
That's right.
opt-in, opt-out?
Yeah, well,
Be
that's the
applied to all.
strategy would probably be, we just need to discuss whether we all think it's best and what the members of, what our Ways and Means Committee members say. Do we make it a statewide option for everybody, which is kind of what I think we probably should do. And yeah, then the council would have to adopt it. There'd be some things on it. But like the mayor said, it's very similar to what Act 98 did or whatever it was that took, where you can't change the assessment rate because it's a constitutional deal where it creates a credit off of growth without raising anybody else's taxes or fees that will apply. Same thing they did to take industrial from originally, 10.5 to 9, and now from 9 to 6. This would allow us to take all of our commercial property and, even more important, apartments and rental homes from a net equivalent of a 6% assessment rate to 4.
Over an 8-year period, so not just a whack.
Actually 10.
Yeah, well, the first 2 years are build-ups, and then 8, you start to feel it. But it's, and we'll have a draft legislation
Yep.
as well.
I think the
Litter
next one
fines-
we've talkked about,
Yeah, we
right?
talked about the
we
litter
talked
and
about litter
fines.
and fines.
For the next one, for mental health services, in addition to Councilman Taylor's discussion around pairing up with other local governments to just increase access, generally speaking, to mental health services, this is in direct response to a gap that was identified through the task force, that there are no services available after 5. We've been hearing about a stabilization unit, and the city has been doing their part, but it's been really slow. And so we've spoken already with Representative Finley about this, and he's very keen on pushing this forward and making sure that we have clinicians or some sort of triage process available for individuals experiencing mental health crisis after 5 p.m.
And I think it's going to be really down to funding from.
Yeah, it's
having
going to be funding for
conversation with
DMH. So this is a state
This is
issue.
this is a statewide issue that, especially in our urban markets where we have higher concentrations, what's happened, and I think between Dr. Bustles and the mayor and me, and especially Ms. Wilson, I think what we're seeing in especially here is these chronically unsheltered homeless people just can't take care of those folks at home. I mean, it's a disruptive deal, and what has happened is, we all know from growing up here, Bull Street's gone away, and the institutionalized position that the state role has been reduced almost to the point, to use Dr. Bustle's words earlier, where we take them out of the institutions and put them in the street. So I think especially our urban markets, we need to make sure that our General Assembly understands that we really do have a mental health crisis, especially in the chronic unsheltered space, where we need to see a statewide attention, really put money into our mental health department.
Can I make a suggestion?
Yes, sir.
If you fleshed out a program and asked the state to fund a pilot program in the city of Columbia to do this, then it would make it easier for them to take something that's worked, take it statewide. Because it's kind of like walking before you run.
This is a state deal. This is a State Department of Mental Health deal where, where you got to take Crass Fair on Fair Road and bring that type of these. It's an institutional deal, and I just.
At the same time, though, I will say that one thing that we do want to make aware, and we've certainly been doing our part with our delegation, is for folks to know that oftentimes we are bearing the social cost of the rest of the state when it comes to homelessness and mental health. And so the state must step in and help us in Columbia because, when we look at how things are even funded, folks from Rock Hill all the way to Allendale come to Columbia for services. And that's a problem when it's just the city putting in money and so that's something that I'd like to see us have conversations about as well.
The only thing I'm saying, and not be argumentative, but if you want to solve the city's problems, don't take on the burdens of the whole state, take on the burdens of your own backyard. Let's get that started. Consider getting that started and then go forward. Huh?
Yeah, they do.
Oh, they
Okay,
have-
so we have something to ask for? We can
I
ask.
thought that funding was still there. It's not?
They say they're standing up the stabilization unit, here it just seems to be slow.
It's just,
Well,
there needs to be a
They
push.
called me today about that.
But it in its form that works, there's a model already.
Okay. And they've done that in Charleston, Greenville is in the process. We have one and somebody else 4, right?
I don't know about the 4, but we know, we can get you that.
So you getting money currently to do this from the state?
The state stands it up, they haven't stood it up in the Midlands to the maximum capacity that we've seen it done in other parts of the state.
Tell you what we're gonna do. So it's really 2 prongs. We have an existing program that we probably, the easiest one, based on what you're saying, is that we need to make sure it's stood up and that we maybe even ask for additional funding and we can get you a memo on what it is and what we need, correct? Sure. That may be the easiest way.
I don't think they're I don't know what the disconnects are, we just need to help connect some dots, because we've talked to mental health, and they have acknowledged that it needs to be stood up in the Midlands. So we just gotta push to
It's
get
just
it
the funding,
More
more funding.
No, I understand.
They may agree or disagree. Agencies have their own priorities, okay? And they'll take any money that's appropriated to them that somebody else asks for, but they won't necessarily take your priority and ask for funding over what they think their basic priority.
No, I understand, but I would tell you, we're dealing with 2 things here. One is and this is a good program. It really needs, I think it's only 11 beds at a time though, isn't it? See, it needs to be bigger if we're gonna look at it individually. But when you're in these discussions with our members of our General Assembly, I'm not so sure that especially our folks from our more rural areas and smaller towns understand what's going on in these bigger urban cities in South Carolina with mental health issues. I mean, again, if you have 1%, if you had 1/10 of the percent population of Somerton, you got 1.5 people problems. That same number in Columbia may be 1,000. So I mean, so let's get a memo on this program. It's good and to make it bigger, and then, but I think we should have this broader discussion.
So, sorry, go ahead, Kyle. I was just gonna say, I would probably then move this to budget instead of policy. And simultaneously, I think we could speak to a little bit of some of the homeless, supportive and transitional housing options. Going back to the whole discussion about us bearing the social cost and how we need the 9 million to be able to move forward with some of the homeless services that we need for the city.
And for the record, try to talk into the mic. We're getting people texting in saying they can't hear y'all converse with us.
Been a
Being
big
told by
problem.
the boss lady back here.
So we caught in the act, right?
An old lobbyist strategy.
You can do anything about anybody in this building but their clerk.
What I was gonna say.
Whatever she says goes.
So we owe you a memo on the
Yeah.
mental health thing.
Right, and I just wanted to jump in real fast so we can capture this. I think what Warren talked about earlier is a smart approach to this, which is, let's talk about how to put something under the Department of Mental Health's. Let's go to our legislators and talk to them about the possibility of putting something in the Department of Mental Health's budget that focuses on this issue. And that's a very doable something.
Right, that's
Yeah.
what we're just talking about.
That
Yeah,
works.
There's an
Just-
existing program that we need to make sure it continues and is made bigger.
And we can see if there is a possibility that in this coming year, that we can put extra funds in there so that we can get it stood
Expand the
up and have it
program.
more than 11 beds, have it
That's right.
We're
That's
all
what
on the
we're
same
talking
page, we're just saying
I
it
think we're good
differently.
there,
about.
yeah.
And just so you know, that program is available, they do it in Greenville, they do it in Charleston, so when you got to allies on this when you go there.
This hadn't been a priority for leadership, anyone in leadership. Mental health has just not been a priority for years, probably since Vern Smith
No,
left.
it's been 25 years.
Yeah, it's been
Look,
25
look,
years, yeah.
it is more critical now. It's causing we have backlogs, we have issues at everything from our unsheltered to our pediatric units are overwhelmed. It's causing physician fatigue. I mean, I could go on listing why it's so important that they invest in this, and we want to be, pushing it. And if we got to call Knox and we got to call Tecklenburg or whoever will, be the next mayor, if there is, we'll get a coalition, but we've got to make sure this happens. We talked about red light cameras and all. I think we got to come up with a different name and a different program on how we push that forward. But, in today's world, I think we ought to be able to get some movement on that if we put it together correctly. So we're going to have to spend a little time carving that together.
Speed cameras.
Well, I mean, look, today you got license plate readers, you got street cameras everywhere. It's not different, but I think it's how we put it together and how we put the program together. And, not being a criminal fine, but a civil fine, and then some of that money going into some other programs to help community-oriented problems get solved. So I think we got to really it needs a little updating and a little different strategy, but definitely on our list.
For those of us who have to cross Assembly Street on a regular basis, it would be very helpful.
Hey, you don't like being Frogger?
You're putting your life in somebody else's hands when you cross Assembly Street by the State House.
Inclusionary zoning bill.
Who's got the
Reference for
detail
that.
on?
This
and
is,
the local government ability to do it.
this is Councilor
Herbert.
Herbert's. What it would, right now, the local governments do not have the ability to require that, or even give an incentive for affordable units to be included in a development. An inclusionary zoning ordinance would either require a developer building a new development with over X number of units to reserve a certain percentage of them for affordable units, or it would not require but give an incentive for the person to do that. And there are no inclusionary zoning ordinances now because it's not allowed in the state.
Why? Do you know why?
I don't know why. I think it's probably because the bills that have been proposed in the past would have allowed a local government to require inclusionary zoning.
Okay.
And that doesn't meet with a lot of favor. So maybe a bill that would allow local governments to have a inclusionary zoning if it's just incentivized as opposed to required might be possible.
And some other communities that I remember discussing this previously before had also given an option, so maybe not included in that, but then they would go build the X amount of units somewhere else, because depending on the price of land and your limitations on height and parking requirements and all the things that went around it, the goal was, let's get the units, doesn't matter how we get it, but have the flexibility to get those units. So I think as we talk through this, we'd look at what the options are.
And the local governments that have been pushing for it have wanted, I'm not going to name any names because I don't think that's productive, but those cities wanted to be able to require their developers that are building like, Prairie Fire around here. Y'all are going to have to put some local government, some affordable units. And like I said, that's met with pushback. And the other, like you said, Mayor, they would be allowed, maybe you don't have to put them here, but you can build them here. Or you could make a contribution into our housing fund at the local government to offset it. knowing that those local governments wanted to require that of developers caused enough pushback that it doesn't go through.
Well, you know, and I think the other thing that we got to continue is until we regulate our own zoning to open up the opportunity for the middle market stuff, you know, everything we built, we pushed it over to single family. So we still have to open up the door to allow our own lots to be before we push on to the others. So there's work on both sides. I see the value that you could have. I think it's all how you craft it, but I think it needs to be where we are in a market, we need to be incentivized, not punitive in the process.
So our recommendation there would be just to continue to kind of explore that as opposed to taking formal action right now?
We will monitor, and if opportunities come up to be helpful in passing an inclusionary zoning bill that allows, that doesn't
It's
give local governments
incentive-based.
requirements. It's
Yeah.
incentive-based, thank you. Yes. Workforce development for young adults.
Hey, it goes to the old theory, you get more flies with honey. And then workforce development, obviously, you know, this goes hand in hand, and we're in a community where 18 to 24-year-olds we've got a real issue, and obviously, you know, it plays into violent crime and other things that are going on. So obviously, as we continue to look for opportunities there to work with the state on, you know, and this may something fall under due, you know, that we could look at that and how that could be part of that.
Have you met with LD? Have you had a discussion?
I have not yet, but I'd like to.
I think they've got some funds over there through the old ARPA stuff and all that. They have programs that
That we could access.
You
I
might
have
be able
not
to,
been
yeah.
aware of that, so if we could set that up, let's go over there and visit with them. All right, so that brings us to the budget.
I think our number one priority's got to be to get the balance of the railroad crossing money, which we were looking for, which would be another 15 million. That puts us at 35, which is what I think we put in our deal. And we're
We're close on the quiet zone,
that
right?
process. Well, on the you talking about the next one?
Yeah.
Yeah, just wanted to make. I think Senator Harpootlian has said that he would work. He would work with all his influence to get us his 2.4, 3 million, and I just want to give you the number, 3 million to build phase 2 of the quiet zones. We'd rather than we had enough. At his suggestion, we split it into 2 phases. We took the money that the city put in, the state put in to do phase 1. And so that's one to key on Senator Harpootlian, 3 million.
3 million.
For phase 2 of the quiet zone. And Ms. Gentry, that, so everybody knows it's in the room, that takes the quiet zone all the way to, which frankly,
Significant.
as we look to build out more residences in the city, it makes it a really big difference, I think.
That's
Once you
three,
get
that's
through
3 million?
3 million. Senator Harpootlian should be your lead on that.
Since we have all of us here, can we get a quick update on where we are with the implementation of phase 1? Because that's the first
Could you
question.
please
We're
come
gonna-
to the podium?
We've approved it, and it's just a matter of
Right.
working through the contract with the railroad, frankly.
That's right.
And
So,
unfortunately, if you can move the railroad, we would be indebted to you. And you would, and that kind of basically the
yeah,
gist of
that's
it.
exactly it.
So, I mean, we're really, and you have any estimation of when we should expect?
So we have secured a consultant that's helping us now push it along. We've met with Norfolk since the council approved the agreement. We're probably a month or 2 away from getting an agreement signed with them. There's some work that has to go into that. Once it's signed, they'll start.
Them being Norfolk Southern.
Right. Once it's signed, they'll start working on construction plans, hard construction plans. So we'll be able to bring back an update, I'd say, in the coming month or so. But
so
we
for-
do have a consultant on board, and council has approved the agreement. It'll go from Gadsden to College is the phase 1. And then the next phase is, starting at Taylor, I believe, all the way to Beltline.
So it's Norfolk, not CSX. That's
It's
Frank
Norfolk.
Macchioverna, if you guys know.
No.
Frank's
Frank's been gone.
Frank gone?
Frank's gone,
John
and
Dillard.
John Dillard, right.
Yeah, John Dillard.
Okay.
John
It's
CSX.
Brian
On
Gwynn.
CSX.
Brian
We've-
Gwynn is the local guy, isn't he?
Yeah, he's their economic development guy, but Frank's been replaced, and I have his name, but I don't have it with me
Good,
right
thanks.
now.
Point being is, you can relay to the senator that we've retained a consultant to speed the process up. You know, he knows the city's approved it, and that we're counting on him for phase 2.
Check.
The
We've
next-
talked a little bit about the next one. Anything you want to add, Councilman Taylor?
Well, this is actually what we're looking at is it's for a housing, homeless facility. I mean, whether it's, hopefully we either have to get to a more permanent rapid housing deal, or better yet, maybe even have the funding to move existing facilities into a more centralized location away from the core of the city.
We're talking about creating an all-around wraparound service campus.
Yep,
Away from Elmwood Avenue.
Away from the Main Street corridor, yeah.
yep.
Yeah, I mean, our rapid shelter that we're propping up is a temporary version, but it's not meant for long-term. So, we've got to start moving towards that solution. And there's a couple ideas that we can talk about outside of the meeting at some point, when we can sit down and have some one-on-ones about how we need to move that forward.
Any thoughts on a price tag?
9 million is what we were looking at.
9 million.
And I think going back to the discussions, and I'm happy to talk with you offline.
I don't know if that's the total amount, but that's where we got to start.
That's where we're starting,
Yeah,
yeah.
we would like to look for a state appropriation of 9 million towards the new facility, which I suspect will be in the north of 20 when it's done. But we will end up putting our grant writers on federal programs and some other programs, as well as raising money within the community. And,
It'll be all hands on
yeah,
deck.
this is, like I say, besides the promise that we made on the quiet zones and finishing out that railroad deal,
This is top
I
three,
think
yeah.
addressing this homeless situation, it is a citywide issue. It's not, we have the shelters are downtown, but the problems are everywhere. Garnish Ferry Road, Harbison, Forest Drive, and I think this is a major step, and I think I would repeat or ask Dr. Bustles to even reiterate what she said earlier.
That we take on the social cost of the rest of the state.
Yeah, I mean, for our friends in York County, we're in their district. Those people come here.
For
We're the
Ledbury.
center for 17 counties for indigent care, so
Orangeburg,
it all
they come
plays in.
here.
What's a statewide perception that Columbia provides great services for homeless people?
Well, it's like one of our police majors said, it's easy to be homeless in Columbia.
I wouldn't. So my thing is, if we're going to be known for being good at providing services, then you need to pay.
Yep.
Because I'm not going to provide for services for free when our taxpayers are the ones that are paying for it. So Todd and I have talked about this, so this is not going to be something that's a surprise. I also talked to Representative Johnson, who's been concerned about some of the homelessness situation in Lower Richland, so they may be two people to talk to.
Next is the home repair assistance. We'll continue to be updating that as we move forward.
I would just say, I think that's something that's important to Mr. McDowell, but,
It's kind of in progress, right?
well, this is, I just want to make it clear. We got $3 million in this last budget that's going through a process of some sort. And I would say from a priority perspective, we always want to have home assistance and things like that, but we probably need to figure out how we're going to address this one before we look at the second one. Yes, no, maybe? Okay. So,
And it's
We just
also,
need to have it on everybody's forefront,
Yep.
because as we're addressing and taking down and moving forward on what was captured last year, there could be some extra needs, so we just need to be prepared for that.
this is also a priority for Ms. Herbert as
Definitely.
related to me, so.
sure.
Mr. McDowell as well,
Reverend McDowell, yes,
Reverend
sir.
McDowell.
Funding for parks.
One of the things that we may want to look at some point in time is perhaps working with the state PRT group to look at the track that's between the river, between the zoo on the river and the I-26 flyway as a potential state park. You know, for you guys that grew up here, that's the old police club property. Again, I don't know how a discussion like that handles. It gives the, you know, it would be a wonderful place to give our everyday folks access to the river. I think it would probably be better managed, cost effectively done as a state park versus a city type facility. So just put that in the back of your mind, and at some point we probably ought to have a sit down with Dwayne Parrish and just see what the possibilities are. And we may get our senators and House members from up that way.
I think the other thing too is really, though, also sitting down with PRT. I think we've been missing some opportunities there of funding sources to enhance our parks and access to the river and other places, even some small places, boat landings and other options, you know, especially with some opportunities that have come available on the Broad River, on the Saluda side, and some other places on the Congaree. So, you know, I think this is a good opportunity for us to let them get to know the capital city a little bit better.
That would be on DNR too.
Right. But I think, yeah, I mean, exactly. It would probably be good for us to have, just to go have some interaction with the agency heads for both DNR and PRT. 'Cause
There's some options for us that the Boating Alliance and some other folks may also put some funding sources up to match anything that we can get from the state to create more options.
So there's been an interest by a legislator to actually propose a walkway across the Earlwood area over Elmwood Avenue to connect to the other side, which makes it easier to access the river. I don't know how the city feels about that.
Well, we've been talking about that for a while with the Elmwood Neighborhood Association and others. There's an interesting opportunity there, and if we could leverage some state funding with some private donation money that's willing to help us with that, we can address it. There it is, because of the situation of where it is a little costlier than other connectivity points, but it would then allow us to have complete access connectivity, so everybody from basically Richland Memorial over could have direct access and go to the zoo. And with what's happening on the Saluda side, you'll be able to go all the way to the dam.
Well, that's actually, to add to that, I think with the grant that was secured last year's budget with some other private sector grants, that the money is in place now to build the Riverwalk all the way to the dam. What the mayor's talking about is, and I think it's under Elmwood instead of over, but it's the connectivity to Bull Street. It's that, what's something green?
It's the Greenway.
Yeah, but doesn't it have a name? Is it the River Greenway or whatever?
Vista Greenway, is that what you're talking about, the Vista Greenway?
Yeah. And so, like I say, then you can come from downtown or all the way through. I mean, and I think what you're going to see us do.
It's the back of the old cemeteries,
Yeah.
the connectivity.
Hey, I was gonna
point.
ask you, on the original list, from last year, the total request was 4 million in total. So you're now at what, for the Vista Greenway? We're now up to about, are we okay? Do we need to ask for more money?
1.5.
1.5, so you got 2 million. So is
That does not include the bridge. The connectivity as a bridge is a different location.
This is coming from Elmwood all the way to
Rough Street.
The bridge is going towards the river.
It's going towards the river.
So is the
Is
2
there a number
million
we want on
deficiency
that?
something y'all want to pursue, or you want?
Yeah, absolutely want to pursue it.
Mr. Tompkins, Ms. Gentry will give you the number. They're going to verify it with engineering.
Okay, but on our original request, we're 2 million.
We're
short.
still 2 million short from the other.
I know, but I want to make sure with inflation, it's not 2.5 million now.
So we need 3 million? 1.5. Have you gotten 2, I think, total?
I've talked to them.
That's Representative Rutherford's been pushing that.
So in the funding for parks, are we including Finley Park as part of this? Because we got the meeting fund.
We're good where we are
We're
with
good?
Finley at this
You good?
point.
So we should add, for the purposes of making sure that we get down what we need to do, we should add Vista Trail to this budget list, Vista Greenway.
Bridge, yeah, the Vista Greenway Bridge connectivity.
Yeah, we'll get you a hard number to
Okay.
complete it.
Okay.
Henry and Dana.
I think we pretty much covered the other things, but
The only other one y'all had, is the 9 million that was appropriated for William Street? Is that the end of the request on?
William Street is good where it is right now.
when we look at what our spending priorities are from the state, it wouldn't make my personal list.
Okay, just ask.
We're working through the river. One of the things that with that is that we believe there's funding to do what needs to be done now. We're trying to work through actually having an agreement, because right now there hasn't been an agreement. So we've been spending a lot of time chasing money that we don't have an agreement to do anything with.
No, and I would say this too, this is kind of from from the committee today, what I think our priorities are, but there are probably gonna be some smaller things that other people have some that we'll reserve the right to come back and maybe add to it, but I think from a tactical perspective, we wanted to have a smaller list, that frankly concentrated on the bigger ask, because when you add a whole lots of other little things, it lets folks do the little ones and say, well, that was on your list. And we understand that our members of the General Assembly here all have their own special things that they're gonna go do regardless, and that's just the way the world works. But I think what we're talking about here are the big ticket items that are important to us.
And I would just reiterate that as these kind of ad hoc things come up, one gap that I think exists is just continuing to have some sort of dialogue, whether it's through email or just giving us these updates of just maybe those hallway conversations or things that you're hearing that would be helpful in terms of some of our priorities. Because I think that this is a very active committee and we're happy to come with you to these meetings and have these discussions.
Do you want to establish a regular, like, once a week, once every 2 weeks, just book 15, 20 minutes for a call to let us tell you what's going on?
I think it'd be helpful, man, last session, we had that spring up on a Thursday afternoon at 5:00, the ankle monitoring bill that really threw us all for a loop. Luckily, we got somebody in the Senate to take it down. That's the kind of stuff that we need to know what's going on, because that affects all of our community.
I think having a regular cadence of meetings once session begins, I think will make sense. So if we could circle back and find, I think 15 minutes is perfect to just even get a verbal
Update.
Yeah.
Generally, from our standpoint, for us that are over there Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursdays, we try to set aside Mondays and Fridays for all our calls, so if you
Yeah.
keep that in mind.
Fridays are fine, yeah.
Okay. We'll get that
I
coordinated.
think the rest of the stuff in here, we've talked about beautification of DOT roads in the city and how we look at that from a budgeting standpoint. And I do think that needs to be conversation with DOT to make sure that, not all the money's going to the highway programs. I know that they want to raise the cap. You talked about that already. And then obviously, anytime we can get extra sidewalk money or improvement money, we want to be there for that.
Yeah, I would just point out something, especially for our media folks in the room. the mayor and our DOT commissioner, Mr. Dukes, and the DOT maintenance director for this area and the county.
And Chairman Walker.
Yep, and Chairman Walker. This just shows you what can happen. They get together, and I don't know if y'all have noticed Gervais Street and Hughie Street, and I was looking at Taylor Street. There are no crops growing in the median anymore. They got it formed a deal, and I think DOT sprayed, and our street sweepers have swept. I mean, it's a remarkable difference on these gateways and if you know, I hate to say it, but if you believe in the broken window theory, that's a major step in the right direction in restoring pride in how our city looks and people taking better care. So I want to thank the mayor and Commissioner Dukes and Chairman Walker and our Mr. Anderson at our Public Works Department who has really done a great job in the county that's why when we talk about this stuff, it's not just about money sometimes, it's about going together, and that's, again, it making a big difference in our city.
Well, the collaboration piece especially, and our focus was the gateways. And, you know, if you look at all we have a lot of entrance ways to our community that are traveled every day by people from out of town. And when you look at us at the state and people realize that we get 15 million visitors a year, Myrtle Beach gets 22. So we get a significant amount of visitors on a day-to-day basis. And so when we see our gateways, and for us to grow all parts of our community, those gateways, and that's where we started our focus. But it's the interior that we got to focus on. So as we think about formulating, let's figure out how we get some more of that DOT money for maintenance. I mean, painting and taking the weeds out of the median and making everything look uniformed goes a long way for us improving properties next door. You know, as the folks on Farrow Road say that my road should look exactly like the road in Gervais Street, and they're absolutely right. But unfortunately, both of them had weeds growing in them. So we're working on that.
You can say that now. I mean, I feel like some of our major gateways, you know, when we came in, they were not looking that great. So
Take just a second too, Mr. Mayor, and explain, because I don't think people understand it. DOT owns a lot of those roads, and we can't just go in, you gotta work together, and, you know, we can't just go in and clean it up.
We can't go back in and patch stuff. We can't do a lot of things. And so it is, I mean, 71% of the 492, might be 93, I can't remember these days, but somewhere in there is controlled by DOT. So creating a better partnership, and the county's in the same situation. You know, they did theirs was Killian Road and out that way. That's where they chose to do this first kind of program. But us coming together, sharing resources, has made a difference, and I hope we can keep it up.
I need to add before we finish, the city's reception is January 31st, 5:30 to 8 o'clock. At the Capitol Center, which Ms. Benjamin secured. And the other reception that's on the official list that night is the South Carolina Economic Developers Association, and they are having their reception at the Capitol City Club. So legislators will be coming to that building. So that should enhance the number of legislators that come to our reception, because we'll be on the first floor.
Oh, don't worry, I'm gonna be knocking on everybody's door.
Good.
We're not gonna let people be eating next door and not come over and visit and say hello.
Good.
Sounds good. All right, are we?
We need to move to executive session.
What's the difference between that and the legislative hometown?
That's municipal associations.
That's the next week.
Everybody come to Columbia and get a briefing and go meet with your legislators. Hometown Action Day.
31st.
excuse me.
Bless you.
Thank you.
Bless you. So would you all like to share this list so the rest of council, make a report out at the November 1st council meeting?
Absolutely.
That be you? Who's?
I'm glad to do it.
Mr. Mayor, we covered
All right, we'll
the
put that on the
items
agenda.
in executive session.
Well, it sounds like we don't need executive session. We're gonna entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All right, we're out of here.
I'll just use me for